Hello everybody, good afternoon and welcome to Pharma CI Europe. After 2.5 years of lockdown, we're finally coming to in-person, face-to-face meeting. I'm really excited and thrilled to be here today with you all. And today, two of my colleagues from Lifescience Dynamics, Aparajita Venkatapan and Meva, are going to present you how to do a world-class competitive landscape. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Aparajita and Meva. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rafa, and thank you everyone for joining us today for this masterclass. Before we get started, a few housekeeping rules or things to note. The session is being recorded, but if you have any issues of potentially being recorded, just maybe put your hands up and we'll make sure that that's addressed. It's also going to be a very interactive session, so maybe look around, get to know your neighbors, and yeah, we do encourage participation as much as possible. But yeah, otherwise, if you, at any point, if you have any questions for us at all, do let us know and we'll pop right over. But yeah, so our talk is called How to Create a Winning CI Landscape Analysis, a step-by-step practical guide. This is the agenda for today. We'll just introduce ourselves briefly, followed by the background of a CI landscape, the methodology behind it, a few case studies, and which are going to be in an interactive format, and finally kind of the key takeaways and conclusions of the session. So to get started, introductions. My name is Aparajita Venkataraman, or Jita, and I'm a consultant at the London office at Lifescience Dynamics. I've been with the company for 4.5 years, over which I've worked on various types of CI projects, including the standard annual monitoring, deep dive, conference coverage, as well as workshops. The latter of both are my expertise. And yeah, I've worked across multiple therapeutic areas, which has allowed me to kind of compare and contrast trends across various spaces, and have also developed new secondary research tools at Lifescience Dynamics as an analyst. Maeva?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maeva. So I have kind of a low voice, but I'm going to try to speak as loud as I can today. My name is Maeva. I'm a senior business analyst at Lifescience Dynamics, also based in the London office. I was lead on multiple competitive intelligence projects across various therapeutic areas like women health, oncology, so very varied. And I also have experience working in market access and market research. And my prior academic focus was more on biomedical engineering, but yeah, I'm looking forward to present you this workshop.
Yes. Before we get into the background of things, we just wanted to break the ice a little bit with the Kahoot quiz. Has anyone used Kahoot before? Yeah? Okay, great. So this involves you please get your phone out and scan the QR code, perhaps just one person from each table maybe, so we can do it as a team format. Come up with a fun team name, and yeah, let's register for Kahoot. I'll just go to the.
Should we project the hand because not everybody has scanned the QR code.
Can you? I think we need cross because it's not. It's not going to. Okay. Yeah. Just let us know once you've scanned the QR code, and I'll go to the website.
Or you can go to the website and just enter the game pin if that's easier.
Has everyone scanned the QR code? I'll just switch to the next table. Is it working?
There's always yes.
Estilo es parte.
No, I didn't. Four in the middle.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. That's what I was trying to do. So yeah, so that's the QR code. If you haven't joined already, I think we've got 2 teams so far.
But we have to join one join.
Sorry.
Do we have to join fire or
Oh no, you can add your team, so you can join and you can make a new team name.
And what team can we get?
I put
How do we call it?
but I don't know how. I know it's a new one. But this is
Let me just try to do this.
I think if we do, okay, sorry everyone. I think there was a bit of an error with Kahoot. So if you would mind just scanning the QR code again, and then you can set up your team. I apologize, there was a bit of an error with the system. And then I think this should enable you to come up with your own team name rather than Ocean and Fire. Oh, there we go. Whose team name was that? Very practical. Okay. Whose team A? You guys?
No,
Yeah.
Merovingian. Okay, we're missing just one more group.
Okay, we're Merovingian.
Oh, no pressure. Oh, take your time. That's okay. That's okay.
Careful, Andrew.
If you prefer, you can. Let me see if it works from my phone. Is it okay? Or perhaps we just have
From the same
Okay. Okay, there we go, twins. Alright, so let's get started. Okay, no pressure, but this is our little quiz. Winner gets a prize. So first question. What was the first authorized COVID-19 vaccine in the EU? You have 20 seconds.
Oh, by the way, what is the price?
I can't say. This is a surprise. Okay, so you've got 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. It is Comirnaty, and which got emergency use authorization or approval in December 2020, I believe. So yes. Okay. Okay, so the key with this game is speed as well. So the quicker you answer, I know. You guys know now. All right. Which one was the top-selling drug in 2021? Yeah, it's just waiting for you. Okay, so we've got 4 answers, and yeah, curveball, it was actually Comirnaty.
So yeah, Comirnaty was the top-selling drug for 2021 with 36.8 billion, and then followed by Humira, of course.
Yeah, Humira got displaced for the first time. Okay, so A is going up to the top.
We're not 0.
Okay, so which of these was the most profitable pharma company in 2021 based on net income?
Yeah, net income is a key word.
Okay, so we've got all 5 answers as Novartis, which oh no, we've got all 5 as Pfizer, but yeah, curveball.
Yeah, Pfizer was very big in revenue, but but in terms of net income, it's actually Novartis with 24 billion, and then of course followed by Pfizer with 21.91 billion.
So very close. Okay, so it's the same here, we haven't moved yet. Okay, so what's the UK regulatory body that oversees approvals for medicines and medical devices? Okay, so we got 2 right answers here with MHRA.
Yeah, MHRA, that's the right answer since Brexit, so since 2021, so well done.
Okay, so we've got twins. Getting older. Okay, that's okay, you'll know now. Okay, which indication does not have an FDA approval, does not have FDA approval for CAR T therapy? So is it multiple myeloma, Hodgkin's lymphoma, mantle cell lymphoma, or acute ALL? Okay, so it's actually Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Exactly. So there are currently no CAR T approved for Hodgkin's lymphoma, however there are multiple being investigated in the pipeline, but yeah, it's still up to come.
So yeah, it stays the same. Arcana going strong. Which of the following therapies has the highest list price as of 2022? Okay, so we got 2 right answers. That's great. Okay, go on.
So yeah, LibMD is a gene therapy used to treat MLD, and it's actually the most expensive price with 2.8 million pounds of list price. So well done.
Yeah, I think it was closely followed by Zolgensma, right?
Yeah, 1.7 billion. So still quite a bit of difference between them.
Okay. So there's a leaderboard at the moment. We've got a couple more questions left. What's the maximum time for scientific evaluation of a submitted application to the EMA? Okay, it's quite technical. Yeah. And again, we made this one hard. Okay, we still got 2 right answers. That's great. So yeah, it's 2 confident. Yeah,
Arcana's still very strong.
Okay, so yeah, Arcana is going very strong. 2 more questions. Let's go.
So you can see that.
So which of the following 2021 M&A deals in the pharma industry is the largest in size? Acceleron and Merck, Arena and Pfizer, CSL and Vifor, or Discerna and Novo Nordisk? Okay, so it's actually CSL and Vifor.
So yes, CSL acquired Vifor for $11.7 billion in December 2021, and then the next one was Pfizer and Arena.
So yeah, final question. You guys are on a roll. On a roll. Coming very close to Arcana. So final question, can you defend your first position? Here we go. Which of the following PD-1 inhibitors is not yet approved by the FDA? And these are your options, which is atezolizumab, Tecentriq by Roche, sintilimab by Eli Lilly and Innovent, nivolumab or simplimab.
I'm not sure, sorry.
We've got 4 right answers. That's yeah, it's actually sintilimab. And if you may have seen the news, back in March 2022, the FDA actually said that they need more US-based trials or patient populations to be included. So yeah, that was it. So final results. 4 in the center, got the 3rd position. Woo! Okay, so we see the winner here. It's okay. Congratulations, guys.
We also get a prize. We got 4 in a row.
Okay, well, we'll see how you do with the case study questions, and then we can. So yeah, well done. Congratulations. Okay, great. So as we go along, yeah, we are going to do a few case studies. So if you don't have a notebook, just shout and I can come and give you one if you need to jot down some notes as well. So starting off with the background and kind of setting the scene, what is a competitive intelligence landscape? We see this as being a structured overview of the current and future competitors within a given marketplace, and with the goal of kind of informing key trends and drivers, and helps us understand how it may evolve in a specific time frame, whether that be a near-term snapshot and looking at it within the next 3 years, compared to a longer-term, maybe 7-year projection of how this marketplace may evolve.
Okay, quick question. Will you be sharing the slides?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, if you'd like the slides, just let me know and I can definitely get your contact and share that with you. So yeah, breaking it down. Firstly, a CI landscape can be used to critically assess the marketplace, to benchmark assets against direct and indirect competitors. And again, we'll define what direct and indirect competitors are as we go along. It allows you to compare assets, whether that be in terms of mechanism of action, route of administration, the target patient population, etc., to identify opportunities and risk. And it also allows you to understand the complete drug pipeline and gives a holistic overview of a specific marketplace to make an informed business decision.
So what we really want to emphasize is that this CI landscape, they can be leveraged to inform your business strategy or across all stages of development. So for instance, if we start on the preclinical side, so on the left side, so this CI landscape can be really important to inform your go, no-go decision. So you want to understand within a specific therapeutic area if there's actually opportunity for new players to enter it, if it's very crowded and that's going to be more difficult. You want to understand what the competitors look like, and it can also help you inform your clinical trial design. So understand what other regimens are competitors exploring, in which patients population. So all these kind of granular details can be really important to inform clinical trial design. And then if we go a bit after, if you click one more time, if we get your drug closer to kind of the pre-launch or the launch situation, then it's going to be really important to understand who are the upcoming competitors and who are currently on the market. You want to understand how they are differentiated, because that's going to inform your messaging strategy, your positioning, to really understand what are the key differentiating factors for your drug. So their CI landscape can really help inform this decision as well. And then kind of the final step, so when a drug comes closer to loss of exclusivity or is post-LOE, it's going to be really important to understand what are the generics and biosimilar that are currently in development, when they may launch in the different marketplace, because again, that can really help informing, how to best react through kind of brand awareness strategy, how to design your tendering strategy. So yeah, very helpful through all the stage of drug development. And also, who is going to really benefit from this landscape? So the CI team, as you may know, it really lies at the center of an organization, so working across a kind of cross-functional team. So a CI landscape is really going to help through all departments. So again, with what we said before, but like if we're thinking about the medical affairs team, it's going to help inform kind of your messaging strategy or your market access, also your clinical trial design. So yeah, it's really important for all the departments within an organization.
So next step is methodology. Now we kind of have an understanding of what a CI landscape is. How do we go about creating one? So we've outlined 6 steps that we think are required to build a CI landscape. First one being purpose. So what is the business decision that we are trying to inform, and who are our key stakeholders involved with this, and what are the timelines to consider? Timelines may not necessarily be timelines for this project, but also is this trying to inform a business decision right now in the near term, or is this something that we're trying to plan for the next 7 years, for instance? So all of these are kind of factors to think about when outlining the purpose of creating the CI landscape. The next step is the competitor analysis framework, which kind of looks into the various metrics required to kind of stratify the landscape. And of course, this is not a one-size-fits-all model, and the metrics will differ based on each time you maybe conduct this landscape analysis, or for various types of projects as well. So what are the key data points to measure, and are there any internal or external factors that we need to consider that may also influence how this landscape is perceived? Once we've kind of set the framework in terms of the purpose and the competitor analysis framework, the next step is where do we look for the data, which is the sources. So which databases can be leveraged for each metric that we've now aligned on? What are the advantages or strengths and weaknesses of each of these databases? And how do we triangulate findings to ensure that there are no gaps within the landscape? We also here will be discussing kind of levels of confidence with the sources that we use. So as Meiwa talked about the various stages of drug development, we'll be kind of walking through which databases are best at which point as well. Once we've got the source and the raw data, how do we make this look pretty and identify who our competitors are? So again, this is establishing not just who our direct and indirect competitors are, but also looking into tertiary competitors, which we'll define as we go along. This also helps kind of conduct competitive benchmarking, so assess the level of threat posed by each competitor, and how competitors can be grouped. And once this is done, it's now applying findings, so kind of looping it back to the purpose to basically say the so what. We've now got this landscape, how do we go back and address the purpose of this research? And the final step, last but certainly not the least, is continual analysis. We think that a landscape should not be a static document and should be refreshed on an ongoing basis. Of course, the cadence of this really depends upon your project, but we'll be briefly touching on that as well. So firstly, the purpose. I think this is again setting the framework for the research. And as Meiwa said, a landscape can be leveraged by various teams within an organization. CI really sits in the middle in terms of liaising with these various stakeholders. For instance, R&D strategy and clinical trial framework. A CI landscape can help inform how long it takes, for instance, for an asset to progress from phase 1 to phase 2 and 3, and etc. And therefore how your particular trial could be structured, the endpoints to be considered, what patient populations to include, and where there is a gap potentially. During the business development and licensing process and partnering process, as well as portfolio prioritization, whether this be doing a therapeutic area assessment to see where which therapeutic area may be of interest to potentially pursue, or within a therapeutic area, which asset looks most promising to potentially acquire. Establishing a company's unique value points and differentiation strategy. So again, really kind of walks into the whole messaging and positioning as the drug kind of develops through through the pipeline. Approval timelines, and again we'll be going into this in a lot more detail, but landscapes are so crucial in approval timelines as well, and we can leverage formatting and visualization as a particular way to call this out. But also launch planning and readiness assessment, as well as LOE planning and anticipating generics and biosimilar entries. So these are just some of the purposes that we thought. Of course, there may be multiple arising from various stakeholders. So really understanding what our purpose is and who this is going to inform will be very crucial to then move on to the next step, which is the competitor analysis framework. So there are various frameworks that we can apply, maybe one, maybe all three, or many more for a given landscape. These are the three that we thought were most interesting and wanted to walk through with you. So firstly, strategic group analysis. So this is essentially grouping competitors based on similar strategies, whether this be competitors who have the same mechanism of action, or competitors who are going for a similar line of therapy or patient, etc. This is kind of a visualization to try and represent what we're trying to say here, but for the migraine landscape, for instance, again, this is just a brief snapshot, it's not comprehensive, but we've grouped this as acute players, preventative players, and players who play across both the acute and preventative migraine market. And we also see that Biohaven, for example, is going for a targeting kind of both with a single agent. So again, this helps us identify trends in terms of, for instance, what we saw when assessing the migraine landscape is there is a shift towards preventative treatment, with more and more players entering the preventative space, and there's also a shift for more oral or more convenient kind of administrations as well. So yeah, grouping assets based on a common theme can help kind of pull up the overarching trends. The next, of course, is pretty well known, but it's the SWOT analysis, which we pretty much apply to almost all landscapes. This is mainly to kind of help identify competitive advantage and future threats as well as opportunities. So this may be kind of conducting competitive benchmarking, compared to the competitors or the landscape in general, or trying to assign a threat for your direct competitors, whether they are a high threat given the same, high degree of overlap, maybe on approval timelines. SWOT analysis also really plays into positioning and messaging strategy, because it allows you to identify what your key strengths are and how you're differentiated compared to your peers, and how that can be worked in to the positioning, and of course business development decisions as well. Pest analysis is slightly more different. It may not apply to all landscapes, but this is just something that we wanted to call out. Pest standing for political, economical, social, and technological. And this is essentially, we see this as more potentially external factors that may have an impact on how you view your landscape. So for instance, the big example here is the COVID-19 pandemic. That had a tremendous ripple, I would say, across every single landscape that we assessed. For instance, a particular asset that may be a strong player within a landscape given at the clinic setting, following the pandemic may have been dropped down because the route of administration or convenience of administration at home became way more important. So thinking of external factors such as political, economical, social, so for instance, aging population, and also perceptions of certain treatments. You may have a great landscape, but then perceptions of actual adoption may limit how a particular drug may fare. So that's again social factors to consider, as well as technological factors. So these are just some examples that we want to pull out for pest analysis. And one example of the COVID-19 landscape that we built kind of feeds into the politico-economical context. So for instance, here with this landscape, we tried to pull out which assets received the EUA or emergency use authorization to then kind of see, to make them stand out a bit more. And of course, there are various other metrics that we used here as well. So yeah, this is just one example that we wanted to pull out. In addition to these general frameworks, we also need to look at it a bit more granularly to kind of outline the specifics. So firstly, the company profile. Do they have any regional partnerships or licensing deals? What their expertise are, the administration, so any reformulation efforts that they're undergoing, what their dosing regimen may be, are they looking into more convenient dosing regimens or combinations, also looking at the geography, so maybe looking at the trials and where is this being conducted, because this will then inform the intent to enter new markets and the regulatory considerations. The development phase, of course, so yeah, who will be first to market and any regulatory designations that may accelerate timelines, mechanism of action, as well as indication and subpopulations. And again, this will make more sense as you see more examples of landscapes, as we will cover. But once we have the general framework in mind, we think these kind of granular metrics will also be important to align on with your stakeholder before going ahead and conducting the landscape analysis.
So the next step, now that we have defined what kind of metrics we want to use to build our landscape, we actually need to find the source. So where are we going to extract this information? So please note that this is not a comprehensive overview of all databases that exist, because of course there's hundreds. But for instance, they can be stratified as this database that inform you more on like the news, the particular events, or the financial situation of companies. So these such as Pharma, Lifescience, or Seeking Alpha, and which may be really important to understand company strategy. For instance, as the company mentioned, when they plan to launch this asset, when they plan to file, so this can inform on that. Then we have more on the kind of clinical side, so trying to see what kind of assets are really being investigated in the pipeline. So you have a lot of this overall database that can give you quickly a snapshot of the therapeutic area. You have some listed here, such as Biomed Tracker, Clarivate, etc. And then the kind of final, more granular database are really the clinical trial register. So they're really kind of the gold standard because they contain all the information you need. So when is the trial going to end? What kind of endpoints? What type of inclusion criteria to really understand which patients the different companies are targeting. So this is just a quick overview, but then when we really thinking about our research, we need to think about what information do I want to extract and what kind of database I could use to extract this information. So for instance, when we're thinking about preclinical assets, so let's say we're in a therapeutic area where everything is really early stage, so everything that is in discovery or preclinical is actually really important to list out. So we have this more global database such as Cortelis, Evaluate, or Biomed Tracker. This is not exhaustive list, but they can be helpful to have kind of a quick snapshot of a space, understand what kind of drugs are being used. But then what we wanted to call out is that when you're really looking at innovation and you want to understand what's happening within universities or academic center to understand what are the emerging mechanisms of action, you may also want to do a quick search on PubMed because this contains a lot of information of what's happening within academia, which may not be as best captured because it's a bit more tricky to find. So that's also one, it's a bit more time consuming, but it's worth it for preclinical. Then when we are looking at phase 1, phase 3, so I'm not going to go through this global database, but we called out also the clinical trial register. And in addition to giving you a bit more context on the trial design, the good thing with them is that, as Gita mentioned, you need to update the landscape regularly because the space are moving so quickly. So these are great database as well to follow what's happening as a trial is discontinued, so that's important. And we also wanted to call out for instance, launch timelines. So there's two aspects. You can look at your clinical trial, meaning when is it going to end, so clinicaltrials.gov or the EU trial register. But if you want to understand when your competitor is going to launch, and we're going to show that during the case studies, you also want to look at any company guidance given during earnings call, SEC filings, investor calls, so you really want to understand when they are planning to actually enter the market and in which markets. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but if you are more interested in patents, then you also have a few databases. And if you want to kind of put in lights your findings and really understand what are the key unmet needs, what is the probability of success of the drug, you kind of need also to look at KOL's opinion, what they think of the space, what's still missing, to understand what opportunity there are in the different space, basically. But yes, that's a list, but what we really, there's two key takeaways that we want to give. So the first one is really, we need to triangulate information. So all databases have their strengths and weaknesses, so it's good to leverage multiple to ensure that your landscape is very comprehensive and that you pilot each limitation through cross research. And the second one is also that you can find a lot on the secondary domain, but primary intelligence can be really helpful to put your landscape a step further, because sometimes you have some knowledge gap from secondary. For instance, there's a drug, the trial has stopped, it's completed in phase 2, but nothing's happening, it's not moving to phase 3, and you want to understand what's happening as the asset is discontinued. Sometimes it's a bit more tricky, or sometimes there's geography where it's a bit more difficult to extract information. So in that case, that can be really helpful to bring it to the next step. So this was the database. now that you have your database, you have pulled out all the source, so you've done a big bulk of work, and now you want to assess actually who are your competitors. So like a common way of classifying them is who are your direct competitors, meaning they are going, for instance, for a similar strategy, meaning, for instance, they have the same mechanism of action, targeting the same patient population in your indication. So those are directly competing with you because they may take up your market share, so current or future market share. You also have these more indirect competitors, so they may have slightly different mechanism of action or target slightly different patient population, but they're still really important to capture because while they may be indirect at some point in time, the company may shift strategy or initiate a new trial, and in the end they may become your direct competitors quite quickly. So again, where the need is to kind of update things regularly because everything moves so quickly. And the last one which we wanted to call out, it's called tertiary competitor. So what we mean by that is that sometimes you need to take a step back and look not only at your indication or therapeutic area, but also at what's happening overall, because something that happens in another indication can actually have an impact on another one. So to give you a bit more example, if you think about JAK inhibitors, kind of black box warning, even if it's been raised in one indication at first, it had repercussion on all the other immunological indication, or when we talk about TIGIT and the recent orders, so it's been really impacting, for instance, kind of investor confidence, etc. So that's sometimes you need to also to look outside your indication just to make sure to anticipate anything that may change. So yeah, that's really it.
Yeah, thank you, Eva. So I think the final couple of steps is applying the findings and drawing the so what implication, and we thought doing this as an activity, which is just about coming up, will help kind of hammer this a bit better. But really looking at the landscape and pulling out the overarching trends, but also diving in deeper to say almost look at it at the therapeutic area level, but also at an asset level to pull out the key considerations. But I think we'll do this as an exercise. And the final one is continual analysis. So landscaping sometimes is almost just the first step of multiple other CI activities that we can conduct. This can then lead to a deeper dive. So for instance, if you're doing a landscape analysis for a BD opportunity, this could lead a deeper dive on the specific assets to conduct due diligence to see if this is actually worth an opportunity worth pursuing. It also then leads to case refinement and gap analysis to see which gaps can be filled through primary intelligence potentially, and ultimately also should lead to continuous monitoring. Against the cadence of this, if it's a landscape potentially for a rare disease indication with not much footfall, perhaps a quarterly update or a more a longer time frame between updates may be okay. But if it's a space such as NSCLC, it pretty much changes almost week on week. So again, keeping this updated on a regular basis is important. And again, working with your stakeholder on how frequent this is important. For instance, at Lifescience Dynamics, for cases where we have to do continual updates or almost live updates to landscapes, we have our tool called Dynamics Tracker, and again we'll be giving a talk on this tomorrow, but we have our proprietary tool called Dynamics Tracker where we update these kind of landscapes on an ongoing basis.
Almost real time.
Yeah, real-time basis.
Real time.
So again, if that is the case, then how can we automate it as well? So these are all considerations to bear in mind. Okay, so now case studies. This is, again, it's not to put anyone to a test or anything, but just to kind of get us moving again. We just have a few examples, for instance, that we wanted to walk through and get your thoughts on how you would approach this as well, based on the methodology we just walked through. So, for instance, let's start with the first example, which is building a landscape to inform a BD&L opportunity, so business development and licensing opportunity. We have a stakeholder who's come to us and said, we would like to evaluate and assess the rheumatoid arthritis landscape to inform a BD&L opportunity. That's not quite enough for us to then dive right in. So what questions would help inform methodology? or what questions should we be asking this stakeholder? And again, yeah, feel free to shout or put your hand up, whichever works. But Raquel, do you want to kick us off?
Well, usually the first question that we ask is, how much do you know? What do you have already? Because and this is, I mean, in total honesty, this is the first question that we always have to ask. We always have to ask because, you know, it depends. When you buy a project with us and with any consulting group, you basically buy a chunk of our time. So it's always important that we focus our time as best as we can. So if you have already done a landscape exercise, then maybe we are doing like a quick update and then we are going straight into a deep dive. But this to me is always the first question.
Yeah. How much do you know already?
And how much do you know already? Yes, and what is, you know, the purpose of it, what you have part of it here.
Okay, that's great. That's a fantastic first question. Anyone else?
Why do you want to do this? So is it an asset in preclinical development that you're looking into? Is it a potential acquisition or interest in a UTA because you want to enter it? So it's the why question.
The why question. That's perfect because, of course, we know, that they say the BD&L opportunity, but yeah, are you playing in the space already or are you looking to enter the space? That's a really great question, yeah? Anyone else?
Andrew, you are the
Yeah, there's lots of questions you could ask here. An obvious one would be what sort of component of the RA landscape you're interested in. You mean disease-modifying therapies or symptomatic? Is there things you would automatically rule out? So you can really narrow down. Rheumatoid arthritis landscape is huge,
Yeah.
but most of it's crap.
Yeah.
So you could probably narrow down and save yourself a chunk of time again based on watching the clock and that ticking away and the cost rising. You want to really narrow down to what's of interest exactly to the point there. I would also this is a typical thing I would have received many times in the past, this kind of question. It's such a vague question that my immediate response would be exactly what is it you're looking at and what do you already know to the points already made. Because there's no point in providing this massive, huge RA landscape because by the time you spend hours and hours producing a nice, full, comprehensive deck and all the work that's gone in, it probably isn't answering their question. At least you've got a hint of a clue, which is something to do with licensing something in, so we're probably looking at something innovative. So you've got to start asking those questions straight away. You've probably got a list of 10, 20 questions. Exactly what? Is it innovative? What sort of size company? What sort of assay are you wanting? Typically they're probably looking for the unobtainium, certainly in the RA landscape. It's something I would have looked at in the past.
Definitely, you've pretty much nailed this. That's absolutely right. So when we get a stakeholder question, it's always important to go back to them with these questions to really get them to define the scope rather than doing a boil in the ocean exercise, as we call it internally. So these are some questions that we had or we would ask as well, of course, in addition to everything else that you mentioned. Are you interested in a company acquisition or a specific asset level acquisition? Are you open to partnerships with universities and academic centers? Because once again, this may help. This would also help what sources you're looking at and narrow the landscape slightly. What's the geographical scope, the timeline for this opportunity, and also are biosimilars or generics of interest at all for this particular ask? So again, for the purpose of this exercise, the stakeholder then comes back saying, we're looking for a specific asset, or these are the responses that they've received. We can now go back to their ask and add in all of these additional context that they've now provided for us. So they want to assess the rheumatoid arthritis landscape to identify novel and innovative assets, exactly what you said, that could complement our current portfolio. We're interested in originator assets developed globally that would fit our 5 to 10 year timeline. Wealth of information here. that is important. And the next question here is which metrics, again, we've given clues by highlighting it, but which metrics are relevant, which databases would you use, and how would you format this landscape? So firstly, therapeutic area, we know is rheumatoid arthritis. The fact that they say innovative assets means that, exactly as you mentioned, they're looking for first or best-in-class drugs that are differentiated to standard of care or are new in the space. Complementing the current portfolio is indicates that they are playing in this space already, so they are potentially looking for an asset to complement their existing asset and not cannibalize the existing portfolio already. Again, originator assets, indicating that they don't want to look at generics or biosimilars, so we can weed out that level of search at this point already. Developed globally, it does mean we need to look at all markets for this particular scope. And 5 to 10 year timeline essentially means they want all the way from, well, I guess the focus is more kind of mid-market level, but yeah, they're looking for assets going right from the preclinical stage as well.
Good question.
Yes.
Would you ever ask the client their budget for this? Because again, everyone wants to license in a phase 3 project with phase 1 money, and then sort of how motivated they might be to get an asset if you come up with a few recommendations. I think that's often maybe not considered by the stakeholder, the client in your case. Is yes, we clearly have a gap in our RA pipeline, we'd like to fill it, come back with some suggestions for us to license, and the reason we haven't done it ourselves is we couldn't identify anything, or we weren't motivated enough to get the support of our management to buy it. So maybe that's an interesting sort of question for you guys is, you really going to do this? What's the outcome when we do all of this work? Are you actually going to commit to something?
Yeah.
And what's your expectation that we might actually find something that meets your needs?
No, that's a fantastic question. Sometimes, of course, they divulge that information and give us the exact figure of opportunity that they're looking for. Sometimes they don't. But yeah, with this particular example, and maybe I'll touch on this a bit later, they looked at the landscape and actually said, this is too nuanced, so we're actually going to walk away from this an opportunity hit. But yeah, that's a great question that we can ask at the onset as well. Again, in terms of the databases, I'll just quickly skip through this, but just to kind of highlight the fact that we did do a PubMed suite for the preclinical aspects. For clinical trials and EU clinical trial register, you can once again narrow your scope down a bit. Of course, if you put RA in these databases, it's going to give you hundreds or almost thousands of hits. So we basically said primary completion date after 2020, so things that are active, excluded, terminated, and suspended trials or investigator-led trials. And again, for these ones, phase 1 to phase 3 is most obvious. And then, yeah, identified marketed assets through these as well. And this was the landscape that we then generated. Okay, a lot to digest, but a few things to break it down a bit more. We, again, it's all about being creative with how you want to visualize your landscape. Some strategies that we employed is, for instance, we use different symbols to identify route of administration trends. So in the ROA space, we found 5 different routes of administrations: oral, intravenous, subcutaneous, intramuscular, and topical cream, but also unknown, which is of course in the preclinical stage. Usually it's unclear what the ROA is. This then again helps you identify broader trends. We have different colors, basically representing for quick identification of mechanism of action. And again, it's up to you how granular you want to be about this. We've just classified all JAKs with this turquoise, whereas if you want to do JAK1, JAK2, etc., this may then be broken down further based on the scope. Flags used to identify the geography where an asset is approved or could be launched. Once again, companies communicate this during their investor events, but otherwise you may need to look at their clinical trials listing to see where the sites are and try to predict this. For the approved space, before I put that up, as you can see, we've also included sales figures, because then these are used to basically identify current market leaders to see who are the big players in this space and what the key MOAs are. And yeah, that's basically how we stratified this. So we just want to give a moment for you guys to talk between yourselves on the implications of this landscape. So what are the findings that we can now draw from looking at this landscape? What can we comment on the development stage, on the MOA, ROA, geography, and any other commentary on this? Again, if you just wanted to jot these down, I can put the landscape up again and just give you 5 minutes to talk to yourselves about this. So yeah, what can you comment on the development stage, on the mechanism of action, route of administration, the geography, what are the key trends there, and any other commentary that you can